These nylon slides in back here ride in small steel grooves of the cabinet in back. And over time, if we don't clean them, oil builds up in there. And if you've worked with oil before, you know that it turns into like a super glue over time. So if we don't clean them, what's gonna happen is they're gonna bind up, and the weight of this lid is going to win in a battle against the slides, and they're gonna tear. Now they may tear fully and the lid may still ride up and down, or they may only tear partially and you might not be able to use your fryer. Simple way to avoid that is spraying that degreaser on and moving the lid up and down to keep as much oil out of there as we can. Moving to the back of the fryer, there's two things you can see on top here. The first is our dead weight cage assembly. There are 3 screws on this. They have knurled sides so you can loosen them and tighten them with your fingers. There is a Phillips head screw slot on top, but I don't recommend using that. There's no reason to. And if you use the Phillips head screw slot to tighten it down, your next team member that goes to clean it probably won't be able to loosen it with their fingers. So we just make sure that's finger tight. We can loosen those and this whole assembly will come out. And inside on top here, there is a rubber gasket that goes with it. So we want to pull this out. Again, this is another great thing to do when you do your cleanouts, maybe every couple weeks. And we just wipe this off. So just bring a towel over. I don't recommend taking it to a wash sink. They tend to get lost. So just bring a towel over to the fryer, wipe it off. If you wipe it off frequently, it will stay looking just like this. If we let it go, say 6 months without touching it, it's gonna get carbon built up all around here. It can still be cleaned, but it's very difficult. And when we get carbon built up around, it might not slide up and down in here like it's supposed to. And that becomes a problem because you get overpressure warnings on your fryer because this isn't raising up and allowing that extra pressure to escape. So as we hit 12 PSI, that's just enough to lift this up and exhaust some steam and keep us at 12 PSI. If it gets hung up because of carbon buildup, it may not lift. Our PSI will go too high and the fryer will give an alert or an alarm because it's too high. So we keep this guy cleaned off. Just wipe it off, it'll stay nice and clean. There are divots on both ends. They're identical. It doesn't matter which direction it goes back into the cage. It just sits down into the cage like that. You can either set the gasket back in place and line it up with the holes, or you can slide the gasket onto here and line it up with the screws so that everything's already lined up and ready to go. When I tipped it upside down, the dead weight fell out. Just put that back in place. And then we can slide this back down in here and line up our screw holes. And then those are just, again, finger tight in place. That's all that's needed. There's no need to wrench those down or make them super tight. We just spin them until we feel a little bit of resistance, and that is sufficient. The other part that is on top of the fryer here is the safety release valve. So if we experience a situation where the fryer won't release pressure for whatever reason, a lot of times we'll see if the oil is overfilled, little pieces of fall off breading, or if you're cooking something like popcorn shrimp or popcorn chicken, those little pieces in there can get into the plumbing and clog it. Like I said, this typically happens when the oil is filled too high, and it can clog up our exhaust, so it won't release pressure. So you'll get an error on here, an E14 error code. And we need to get the pressure out of there so that we can open the lid, because once this is over 2 PSI, you won't be able to lift this handle no matter how hard you try. So to release that pressure, there is a safety relief valve in back. There's a small ring back here. It's a key ring. You'll want to have either a hot glove on or get a kitchen utensil to pull on that so that we don't have any problems with steam burns. And then you just pull this up. This isn't like a grenade. You don't pull the pin out. It's spring loaded and it stops. So you just pull it up till it stops, and the extra steam will vent out the back of the fryer until it gets below 2 PSI. Then you can open your lid and get your product out so that it doesn't continue cooking because the oil temperature stays the same. Back to the lid here, as far as some cleaning, As you can hear now, the fryer is switched into mix mode. So like I said before, it is opening the drain valve, turning on the pump motor, and mixing the oil so that everything's the same temperature. This is perfectly designed to hold a sheet pan under the catch down on the bottom of the fryer here. This is handy both for loading product as well as for cleaning. For loading product, we have our rack removal handle here, and you can use this to get these racks out when they're hot. If you turn it upside down to start and use this edge to get the front of the rack, and then you can turn it to this position. This hooks on top of the rack, and then you can lift the racks out of place. And a sheet pan just perfectly holds 2 of these trays. So you can put your trays on sheet pans, transfer them near your merchandiser or to a table where you're going to package them, and you don't have to do all that right in front of the fryer. This is also nice to put your carrier on when it comes time to clean. So I'm a little bit of a neat freak and I like to keep the kitchen clean. So I like the sheet pan to keep oil from dripping everywhere. So with some heat gloves, because the carrier was just down in the oil, which is hot now, I'm going to put heat gloves on to grab hold of the carrier. And then you can lift the whole carrier out and it sits nicely right on this tray. We can move it out of place or out of the way so that we can lift the lid and clean the fryer. You'll notice on the top of the carrier, there's these kind of backward 7 shaped rails and then a little notch in both sides. That matches up with the half moon shapes that you can see on these bars here. So when you slide the fryer into place, when you slide the rack back in, these 2 rails catch on these 2 rails in here, and then you slide back into place and the half moons will fit in the carrier and hold it in place. So when you're taking it out, keep in mind those half moons are there and we have to lift it over those to get it out of there. Once we've gotten the carrier out of the way, we can move our sheet pan to a different location just so it's out of the way. And you saw when I was demonstrating how to take the carrier in and out that I lifted the lid up and out of the way. To do that, you may want a heat glove if you've been cooking all day because this rim can get hot. But if you put a palm on here, lift it up, you probably won't be able to hear it from here, but there's a little click in back until it clicks. And then you can rest the lid in this position so you can clean inside here, and we can pull this gasket out and clean that. We want to do that every 90 days as well. To pull this gasket out to clean it, it just pushes into place. So we would pull the whole gasket out. Again, with a damp towel will be fine. Wipe it all the way around and then line it back up on the tracks here and push it into place. We want to flip that over when we do that. So flip it to the other side so that we maintain a good seal. Speaking of a good seal, the Frypot rim here, we want to try to keep as clean as we can. Oil tends to build up over time and it gets harder to clean, but if we wipe it every day, it will stay nice and clean for us. I actually wipe it throughout the day when I'm cooking to make it even easier. And you can keep a kitchen towel nearby that you use, or you can use paper towel. Just give it a wipe around the edge to make sure that that rim stays clear of debris so that we get good contact with this seal. If we have a big buildup in one area, it can cause a gap in the seal and it can leak steam while we're cooking. Foremost in our mind is someone getting burned by the steam. And then second, we worry also about not building enough pressure and cooking under pressure, which is what we want the fryer to do. Probably can't see it, but when it's time to take the lid back down, there's a small backward L-shaped piece on the left side of the lid with a small bolt coming out of it. If we lift the lid a little bit higher and then lift that bolt up to the 12 o'clock position, then you can lower the lid back down and it's ready to have the carrier on it again and get back to cooking. So I want to talk briefly about the cleaning tools that came with your new Velocity fryer when it comes time to do the daily maintenance. Again, this is done once a day, typically at the end of the day. I have 3 of them set out here. The first one is called a gong brush. Looks like a big elephant toothbrush. This can be used to clean the sides of the pot. It can be used to clean the bottom of the pot and gently clean the inside of the elements. The elements are located at the bottom of the pot and they run around the perimeter of the pot. This is an L brush. This fits nicely between the elements and the side of the fry pot, so it can be pushed down to the bottom of the pot and then turned to clean the corners of the fry pot as well as underneath the elements. And then this is your pot scraper. This is to clean that crumb line we talked about earlier at the end of the day. There's 2 sides of this that are a little hard to see, but this side you'll notice has a beveled edge and this side has a flat edge. Anytime we're using this on the inside of the fry pot, we want the beveled edge against the metal. And we hold it at about a 45-degree angle and we're gently scraping the crumb line. There is a protective coating inside the vat that helps to keep us a little more non-stick. And if we're too harsh with the pot scraper, or if we use this flat edge, it can scrape off that coating and it just makes your job harder. It makes it harder to clean. So when I use this, it actually helps quite a bit if you dip it into the hot oil and then scrape the side. So I'll go in the oil, scrape a little ways, dip a little more, scrape a little ways, all the way around. That helps to get some of that crumb off there. Once you've done that, then you can go back with your gong brush and just give those sides a little brush as you're going. Those are the 3 cleaning tools that come from Henny Penny. Those are all food grade and heat safe. When I say heat safe, I mean that hot oil will not melt them. But if you leave it sitting in the pot on an element, it will still melt. The elements are just too hot. But hot oil, you'll be good to go with this. Once you have done the scraping of the crumb line, then I like to go into the maintenance filter because that's when it's going to drain the oil out. Like I said, we like to use that oil to help clean that crumb line. And once the oil's in the bottom, it's going to start pumping through jets in opposite corners. And you do not want to put this down in front of one of those jets because it can deflect oil onto you, hot oil. So we don't want anyone to get burned. You hear a small motor going right now and you might be able to see little bubbles in the pot. So that's the auto top off function. So like I said before, in our 3rd function of the startup process, we have top off. So it turns on that motor and it fills a little bit of oil. It's going to try again. We're not quite to the line yet. And it's going to keep filling until we get to that line in the back of the fry pot. There's actually 2 lines there. We'll see them both in a minute here when I drop the oil down. The bottom line is the cold fill line. So when you put fresh oil in, fill it to the bottom line, because when it heats, it's going to expand a little bit. And then if it needs a little more, it's going to grab it out of that auto top off. Once the oil's heated, you should be right at that top fill line. And there are sensors in the pot that line up with that top fill line to tell the unit that it's got enough oil in it, or if it needs to grab it out of the auto top off to do that. So as we talked about before, I've gone into the filter menu and option number 2 is our maintenance filter. So I'm going to go ahead and push that. And it's going to ask us on the screen, are you sure you want to do that? Have you pushed it by accident, or do you actually want to take 20 minutes to clean the fryer? There's an option on the left that says yes with a check mark, and on the right that says has an X and a no. We're going to push the check mark next to the yes, the white button. The first thing we hear is the drain valve open. It's going to drain the oil down into the drain pan. So we've already used our pot scraper at this point and cleaned the crumb line. Now we're dropping the oil down and we have our gong brush and our L brush to clean the inside of the pot. This is pretty straightforward. We're just trying to get as much crumb as we can down into the drain in the bottom. The pump motor is turned on because they're in opposite corners of the fry pot, and that actually creates a swirling motion like a sink draining to try and draw as much crumb as we can into the middle of the fry pot, which is where the drain hole is. Once this drains all the way down, it's going to bring a menu back up on the screen, and one of the options will be wash. Wash is the next option. And what wash does is turn those jets back on for a longer period of time. Now you can use the gong brush at this point to help clean the bottom of the pot with the jets. That won't cause oil to splash back up. Like I said, we don't want to put the pot scraper down there because that can deflect oil. As a side note, make sure you have your protective equipment on that your store or restaurant requires when you're cleaning with hot oil. That might be an apron, face shield, heat protective gloves, whatever you're supposed to have on. I would recommend at least eye protection and heat protective gloves so that we don't get any burns. Those are no fun. So on the screen here, it says fill, wash, or drain. We're going to choose wash. We don't want to fill it back up yet because we haven't finished cleaning. And we don't want to drain, the oil is already out. So the middle option is wash. And as I said, it turns the pump motor on, and all it's doing is there are small circles in these corners of the pot that are shooting jets in opposite directions to create that swirling motion. I would just use the gong brush to help get those crumbs into the drain hole where the oil is already flowing. Clean anything that you might see on the elements. They're going to stay pretty clean generally. And then you can use your L brush to sweep anything out of the corners that's accumulated in the corners of the fry pot. This will go for a preset period of time, but there's also an option on the screen to stop it. It's just a green square that says stop. You push the white button next to that, and it's going to stop that washing function. So if you feel that the unit is sufficiently clean in the bottom and you don't need it to wash any longer, you can push stop. It's going to turn off the pump motor, let all that oil drain back down. And it's going to bring us back to our screen with three options: fill, wash, and drain. We've already cleaned the pot. We're happy with how it looks, and we would want to fill the oil back up. So the top option has an up arrow. Push the white button next to the up arrow. It's going to close that drain valve. Those beeping noises you hear, that's your signal that the drain valve's closing. That's important if you're ever using the straight brush that came with your fryer. I didn't put one of those out for display, but that is just a 36-inch long brush that is straight that can be used to clear drain clogs. If you get a bunch of debris built up in the drain, it might not be able to drain quickly, so you can use that to clear it. We don't want to leave the drain brush in there because if that drain valve closes on it, it can damage the actuator motor that moves the drain valve. So make sure if we use that, we do it quickly and we remove it from the fryer so that it doesn't get caught up in that drain valve. So now it's closed the drain, the pump motor's on, it's going to pump the 75 pounds of oil from the drain pan back up into the fry pot. It only takes it about a minute to do that. When it gets to the top, you're going to hear and see bubbles coming from inside the fryer. That's nothing to worry about. All the unit is doing is keeping that pump motor on to get as much oil out of the drain pan and the lines as it can, because oil is expensive. So if for whatever reason you've dropped something in there or you need to clean it a little bit more, you can stop this function and drain the oil back down again. So now you can hear and you may be able to see inside the fry pot, there's air pumping through the lines. Like I said, that's just getting as much oil out of the lines as we can. This will go for a preset amount of time that is listed on the screen there. It counts down for you so you know how much longer you have. You can either let it go that full amount of time and it will stop on its own, or there is another stop option so you can stop it. I usually like to give it at least 10 seconds to go through that process, and then you can stop it if you're in a hurry for whatever reason and need to move on to something else. Once it has counted down to 0, it's just going to stop. We've used fill, drain, and wash. We've already done those. We don't need those options any longer. On the right bottom corner of the screen, there's an X. If we push the button next to the X, it's going to take us back to this screen that shows polish, back, or exit. So you can either choose back, which will take you to the maintenance clean screen. You can exit out of there if you want to skip the polish, which I don't recommend. And then there's a polish button. It's the top button. If we push the white button next to polish, again, you hear that drain valve open. It's going to start draining the oil down, and it's going to kick the pump motor on. It's going to give you a timer for your polish that is preset at 15 minutes. Once it starts to polish with that 15-minute timer going, You don't have to stand there and watch it. You can go and do whatever other duties that you have to complete for the day. If this is the end of the day, or you can go, if it's the beginning of the day, and do other duties to get the day started. And the polishing, just to reiterate, is very important to preserve our oil life. If you use a filter extender, this is when we want to put that in, is during the polish. The filter extender, which is also produced by Henny, will attract those particles from the oil to the powder that you put in and trap them in the filter paper. So that is just another way that we can extend oil life, is with the filter extender. As you can see now, once it's started the polish process, we have a timer in the lower left corner. This one is set at 15 minutes. If you find that that's too long and that's not working for your business, we can adjust that in the menu down to 10 or 5, whatever works for you. At least 5 is best in my opinion. If you can wait the 15 minutes, even better yet. There is an option to stop this, which I'm going to do for demonstration purposes today, but typically we want to avoid stopping it once it's started if we can avoid it. To stop it, there's an X in the lower right corner. It's even got a little exclamation point to tell you that you really don't want to stop it. But you can push the white button next to the X. It's going to give you a little alert and tell you that it's stopped. And it'll bring us back to that fill, resume, or quit on the menu screen. So we can either choose to fill the pot back up so we can start cooking again or end our day. We can go back to our polish. It will pick up where it left off and resume running the oil through the filter paper. Or we can quit altogether and leave it where it is, which we don't want to do because we have oil in the pan. We don't want to leave it there overnight because, as I mentioned before, the filter pump motor does not like cold oil. So what we're going to do is push the top button with an up arrow. That is our fill button. It's going to turn the pump motor back on, and it's going to fill our oil back up to level.